Do you remember the first time that you heard a song and just found that connection to music?
I don't, because it started so early. One of the moments that I think I definitely can recall discovering James Taylor for the first time on vinyl, like listening to one of his records, and it just changed everything. I think I was old enough to like realize that there was an energy around different kinds of music that I hadn't been exposed to quite yet, because I grew up in the church, you know what I mean? So all of that, I definitely felt emotion from the spirit of that, right? But this was a different kind of thing, because it wasn't based in like religious elements. Definitely like the James Taylor stuff is what kind of broke me into seeing another side of expression with songwriting, and the way that drums specifically can move a song and help tell a story in a song. Yeah.
It sounds like you started playing at a pretty young age.
Oh yeah.
When did you start recognizing that there was a career that was possible?
Oh man,
at an instrument?
I think that's the part that was protected from me. I had no idea. I just did it because that was what you did in our family. Like you serve in your gift and what you were good at and strong in and developed in. And so I didn't know that there was a career. I started recording in studios with like some great legendary people in Memphis. And I was the kid at the time. Like I was the guy they bringing in. I knew nothing. So I started recording first before I started playing live, actually. So that kind of brought me into a place of understanding some things that I didn't know before, which opened up this idea of like, oh, this is a thing you could do to make money. Because I never made money. Like playing at church, it wasn't about money. It was like we're serving the service. So that was my first experience of like, man, I could go in the studio and play some music and do a good job and get paid.
Right.
Whoa.
How did some of those first opportunities come about?
Man, it came about, I think, from playing with my dad and his friends out in the city at certain events, and they saw me coming up since I was a little kid. So I think it was just like them waiting for me to get to a certain point to bring me on to do things. Like I have a cousin named Ronald Turner. He was around during all of my early development. And so I think when I got to a point of like being 15, 16, he had been playing around Beale Street and around different things in the city. And one of the guys he plays with at the time, Kevin Page, was looking for a drummer, and he brought me in. And so that was like the first break, I would say, to get in. And they saw me as a person that was open to speak the languages of what was happening. And that gave me that experience of like, man, these guys are this is what they do for a living. They make music, they produce records, a studio. Whoa, like what are these knobs and what's that, like mics? And it was all new for me. But I was very slow to speak and very quick to just observe.
Yeah, there's a really strong importance of getting into those early studio situations and listening.
Yes.
And using that opportunity to really get educated by the people around you that have more experience and
for
stuff.
Sure.
Were there any mentors that you found in that studio world that taught you something very valuable in those early days that has stuck with you? It's been a great lesson.
One mentor that really took me to the next level was James Waddell. He's a producer here in Nashville, and I started working with him just off a whim of somebody calling me to want to do a song at his studio. He was an engineer, and he saw me and he started calling me for other stuff. And his way of bringing me up was so what I needed. And I was used to that kind of the language that he spoke and how he spoke to me and getting what he needed from me. It was kind of similar to my dad. Like he would just tell me the truth. Like, no, that wasn't good. Do it again, or be in the middle of a take and he just stopped and restarted without saying anything. It lets you know like, yeah, no, that wasn't it. We're not headed the right. So let's not even waste time. We're not going the right way. So I learned a lot from that. And some people that would crush, I can imagine that would crush their whole thing. For me, I was like, all right, cool. He gave me the challenge of like, let me get this right, So James Waddell definitely taught me a lot about learning how to produce myself within the realm of being on the drum seat, not looking for someone to always tell me what to do, but use the discernment and the things I've learned from being observant and just apply those things quickly. be like, hey, let me hear myself real quick, and go in the control room and listen and make adjustments in how I'm touching the instrument, what I'm doing, the tuning of it all. He was very instrumental in that part of the evolution of truly becoming a recording drummer.
When we think about getting gigs initially, one of the things that I see as a studio owner is musicians call. I just got a call this morning from someone. I just moved to town. I'm wondering if you could put me on your list of studio players.
Yeah.
And I would love to put every single musician that wants to play on a list. But the challenge is, as a producer, we have to hire the people that we know and trust and that we can guarantee are going to come in and be the right fit for the project.
Yeah.
So it becomes really challenging to try somebody out brand new on a session that we're in charge of.
Yep.
But what happens is the example that you mentioned, where an artist brings in a musician to the studio and then they're introduced to the engineer or the producer, and now they have the opportunity. And that is, aside from getting direct referrals from musicians, the number one way that I start working with new musicians is someone else brought them into a session, and it was their choice to bring them in, you know?
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, we got to have this drummer on it. And like, great, man. Yeah, let's try him.
That's still happening today.
Then you start working with them.
Yeah.
So that's one way that's a really great way to start getting some gigs and get your foot in the door that is a little bit different than what someone might expect. Mm-hmm. What are some other ways that you found that are maybe outside of what you would have expected would be ways that you got gigs in the early days?
The opportunities came by understanding the one opportunity is the biggest opportunity you have present. Not looking for how can this get me something else. It was like, this one moment is the moment. So let me do a great job. Let me, what I like to say, spoil the artist. Let me do so well. Let me serve this moment so well to where when this moment is done and it goes to wherever it goes, you know, you never know who's going to hear it, who the other musicians are on the session that might already be veteran and do other things, who might mix it. So I think I got those opportunities from just caring about each one at a time, making those relationships and people seeing my temperament and my energy, because it's way more psychological than it is creative. You have a lot of personalities you have to melt with. You have a lot of approaches of how people approach music that you have to adjust to. People who I think were in those sessions that had that experience, and they may have noticed things about me in a one way and referred me to other things. And then I move into that thing and like figure out, okay, what does this thing need from me? I think that's the best way I could say how those opportunities kind of rolled in.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
The opportunity in front of you in the moment is the most important
thing. That's the most important thing.
And the only thing.
The only thing.
Right?
Yeah.
Man, that's incredible.
Yeah.
So the other thing you mentioned was the ability to be able to take criticism and not let it bring you down, which is a challenging thing because there's a couple things that happen with that. Like one is that you've spent so much time shedding on your instrument. Mm-hmm. And when you get to the point that you're brought into those situations, and once it starts happening a few times, you start to gain confidence for your ability. And then when someone shoots it down, the challenging thing is to not let that turn into like a defense, mechanism where now you're bummed out by it or you're frustrated by it or that sort of thing. The only response that's acceptable, I think, is to be positively focused on, okay, well, what's the other option? What can we do to dive into it? So you looked at those situations as an opportunity to grow, and it motivated you, to move forward. How do you stay in that mindset as your career progresses? And
well, I'll give you a little bit of the root of how I even got to that point. Growing up at church with my dad, he was a music director, and I'm a kid, 9 years old, playing at church. We're in the middle of a song. The church is the choir singing, everybody's doing the thing, and I do something wrong. I do something that just shouldn't happen in the music. He looks at me, points at me in the middle of the song while he's playing and directing, and tells me to get up in the middle of the song. And there's a row of kids behind me that waiting for their turn. So I got to get up in the middle of the song and do the dance where you scooch around, and the other guy comes in and he takes over the kick drum and the sticks, and you keep playing the groove. Everybody noticed it, and I got to sit down and I got to like deal with that. And he didn't have time to come over there and coddle me and tell me, all right, so you know why I told you to get off, right? And tell me. I had to sit there and pay attention, get through the emotions of my embarrassment, get through the emotions of my ego, and really figure out, all right, what did I miss? Because now this guy's on here and he's he's taking his opportunity to do whatever he's supposed to do right now. And I messed mine up. Some people would consider that being harsh. I don't. My dad is brilliant in that way because he knew I can take that kind of criticism. He wouldn't necessarily do that to someone else, but he knew I could take it. I wouldn't shut down. So I would be like, okay, next time I get on there, I'm gonna show him. I'm gonna do it right. I'm gonna figure out what I missed. So you take that kind of core experience, and then you get in a professional experience where, again, I think for me, it's all rooted in service. If I'm in a session and something's not kind of jiving or vibing, I could take those criticisms because I know we're all here trying to make the best thing we could possibly make. And I'm already in the room, so I'm not questioning if I'm the right guy. I've already been called. So now it's like, how do I tap into what I need to give this moment? And I think that's how I get through those moments and keeping a sense of energy and positive joy about it. Mm-hmm. Whether it comes across harsh from the source or whatnot, it's like, all right, cool. Like I learned to not take offense, right? To take offense is like a waste of time. It's a personal choice. My dad would say to me, if somebody offends you, somebody hurts your feelings, and they're handing something to you, it's your responsibility at that point of whether or not you're going to take it. And that's what taking offense is. It's like, you don't have to take offense. I could just be like, all right, I hear what you're trying to say. You might not be the best communicator, but you're passionate about what you want to get done. You might not know how to speak to me, but I'm not going to take that personal because I'm not going to respond there. Like, I want to keep this in a good place. So I think that's how I continue to move forward in being positive and handle just kind of the evolution of different situations.
Keeping that, you find the positive alternative
yes.
of it to stay in that zone and recognize that that's going to keep you in a healthier mental place. It's going to help you get through the session.
Yeah.
And then after that point, then you can decide whether or not you choose to work with that person who communicates that way again in the future.
Exactly.
But in the moment, you focus on the moment and how can I succeed right now?
Right. And I might not be the right guy for the gig. We figure that out in the situation. And I might get overdubbed, it happens. But I don't want my reputation after I leave there to be like, man, this dude went off or he responded in a way, because that's what's going to be spoken about, not who said something, who may have triggered something. It's like, man, I have control over my will, and my will is to just be here and be cool. The way I handle that also speaks volumes to whether or not, okay, I still like Terence. I want Terence on my session. We probably need to get a different kind of da-da-da-da. Mm-hmm. I might need to get another person to play this role because that wasn't cool. But if I act a certain way, then I'm probably in that category of like, man, I don't know if we should call Terence. Like, he was right, but like that just kind of put the whole thing in a downer vibe based on how I respond.
Right. That's a great point. Even if you end up being correct, even if they end up going with your idea, if it brought the mood down, the vibe is what
it's gone.
Is most important at the end of the day.
Yeah, man.
And then that's what's going to affect the long term, is how someone remembers how they felt when they were in the room with you.
Yes. And to me, I don't want that energy. I know this sounds so interesting and confusing for some people, but I'm very philosophical when it comes to music in that way. I don't want that energy to be on the song. Like, I'm here to do the song. I want to understand the song we're doing. What is it about? What does it mean to the artist? Why did you write it? Mm-hmm. What is it referring to? So I can find some kind of common ground to bring about the emotion in which I apply the note and the feeling to the song. Mm-hmm. So if anything like that happens, man, I don't want to be part of that energy that made that song now be a thing that people remember when they were cutting it. This thing happened. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't want that.
Right.
And I don't want that to be tied to my name. I want it to be a good thing. I want it to be, again, Terence came to serve and provide a service, and he did a great job.
Yeah, I mean, I think that most of us get into this because at some point in our lives we had that sort of spiritual moment with music.
Yeah.
Where we felt an emotion and a feeling and energy from listening to music that got us so excited that we wanted to recreate that in some way.
Yeah.
And so when we get into the mechanics of like the studio process and the actual like job of it, the labor of it, it can become over time those types of things where like you're just losing sight of the foundation of what got us excited about doing it in the first place. So I love how you have the perspective of staying in the spirit and the feeling of the song and the emotion and making sure that you keep that energy in the room, and then let the other energy deal with itself afterwards. But if we're in the moment of performing the song, use the things that inspired us to do this job in the first place.
Yeah, man.
It's a lot easier said than done.
For sure.
Because there's definitely frustrating situations, and we're all human, and there's all moments where we can start to get caught up in it a little bit. But I feel like the more that we're aware of it, the easier it is to start to deal with it over time, and the less that those overwhelming things start to happen.
Yeah.
Are there any things that you do before you go into a session or any sort of particular like gig environment to set your mindset right for being prepared to be in that point, or is it kind of just completely second nature for you at this point?
No, I think there has to be a level of preparedness. One of the biggest things, I think, nothing about this is precious. Not to be so precious about it all. It's a ever flowing organism, So I don't want to go in with certain expectations of the people I'm going to be working with or what I think we might create. I want to go in just kind of like blank slate as possible and not have any preconceived assumptions. You go in a session and it's like they give you references. This is what but even those references, I'm like, cool, that was a reference. That was a old record or whatever. That's still not what's going to happen today. So I look at that as like, what do I take from that? That's a feeling. The reference for me is more of a feeling. So how can I try to emote that feeling? So that's how I prepare for whether it's a recording or a live situation, playing with different artists of different mediums, different styles. It's just like, how can I find this common thread to bring a certain kind of thing to them? What version of me do I bring to this table?
Mm-hmm.
We live in a culture where people are just like, accept me for me. This is who I am. That is a beautiful sentiment. But all of us is not necessary at every situation. We have to know how to like use wisdom to put what we need in every situation, right? Like, it's like all of me is very complicated in a beautiful way, just like life and living is. So like, I don't need to come in and be like, well, this is my unapologetic self. No, I want to come in, again, you're going to hear me say it a lot, to serve. So to serve means to be a vessel, to be open, and nothing about my ego should be so precious where I'm like, man, this has to be there because I'm part of it and this is what I do. It's like, no, I could do a lot of things. Which version of that should be represented today? I want to be challenged as well. Being open is very vulnerable. Like we see that in any relationship in life. It's a very scary thing to be open and vulnerable. But man, it's a beautiful thing when you allow it.
So as your early stage, career started to evolve and you got these, few opportunities and stuff, was there a point where you said, okay, this is going to be my career? Or was it what was the sort of like mindset and transition into, I'm going to play drums full time for a living?
There was no definitive thing. It just kind of happens. You do it long enough and you stay consistent long enough. You see people fall off. They're not sticking with it. Like, man, it's not working. Let me go to something else. Mm-hmm. I just kept doing it. And like my dad would say, just stay focused on the road that you're on, and things happen. I didn't have a 5-year, 10-year plan. I didn't have a vision board. You know what I mean? Like mm-hmm. I just, every opportunity, like I said from the beginning, was the biggest opportunity and the only opportunity, and I wanted to serve it. And then it brought about all these things that I'm still to this day geeked about, like I'm a 15-year-old kid, man. Uh-huh. I think the transition, if I had to make it a definitive moment, I think it just was only playing drums, not having a side job, saying, okay, I'm going to leave the Gap. Mm-hmm. Right. I'm gonna not sell cars. So I've done all these jobs, right. The challenge was actually the job, mm-hmm. because I knew it was taking me away from what I'm called to do, what I'm destined to do. When I was selling cars and I'm on the lot and I'm standing there waiting for people to walk up to show them cars, I'm sitting here like, man, I could be practicing, or I could be just like listening to some music that kind of strikes a thing. Like I was in dream world because I'm a creative mindset. Now I was good at selling cars because I know how to connect with people and I'm passionate about a product that I believe in. But those are strengths that I was like, that needs to be in the music I'm making, or making music with people, being passionate about the product I'm selling, which is music, or the energy of music, you know? So I think it was a definitive moment of that. Like, I think the last corporate job I had was selling cars, and it was fun. But then I was like, this is not it. This is draining my soul. So I just started playing gigs. I took everything I possibly could around town. And I say everything I possibly could. I took what spoke to me. Your no can create your biggest yes, your greatest opportunity. Because sometimes you can say yes to a lot of things just because you're trying to survive, and you miss the big yes, right? Because you're busy just trying to do all the things. And I was okay with just being at home and like studying music and listening to music and playing music by myself, or just literally getting music in my soul. I was okay with that until the right thing came. And the right things always came. Partly because I made sure I kept in touch with people intentionally and sincerely, not from the standpoint of trying to get an opportunity, but just be like, hey man, how you doing? Or what I started to do was reach out to artists that I was like digging. A lot of my peers are always shocked by this, but like I would just message them in the age of social media. I would just message, hey, I love what you're doing. I'm digging your vibe. If you ever need a drummer, I would love to be part of that. Or you're in recording, and they would respond like, are you serious? Oh my God, I love your work. I love what you do. And they would be shocked that I would even be interested. And I'm like, that was shocking to me. You know, I was like, I just want to play some music with good people, you know? Mm-hmm. I still do that today.
That's a great example and a really important point to make about the reaching out, you know, to folks by really starting with an authentic passion for what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Because most people don't do that.
Well,
because we're not really taught that. We're just taught like, you know, go out, find opportunities, network.
Yeah.
But the network thing gets so pushed on just the idea of just getting contacts, like making contacts, not building relationships.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the approach that you take is trying to build authentic, genuine relationships with things that really inspire you.
And also let people know I see them. Mm-hmm. You'd be surprised. Most people don't even think, they know they're doing things, mm-hmm. but to be acknowledged and say, man, I see you and I'm digging it. Whether it's I could do the same thing to another drummer.
Right.
Like, bro, I see you, bro. You killing it. That sounds good, bro. That alone, it's like, bro, thank you, man. Thank you for seeing me. We assume everybody sees us because of social media and the way the culture is. It's like, man, just acknowledge someone. Whether I get the opportunity to play with them, that's not the point. I just want you to know I see you. Not that I'm special and I'm some big name somebody. I'm saying like that you are seen by people who respect and dig what you're doing. That's it.
Right.
If it turns into something, that's cool. If it doesn't, it's still cool. I just want you to know I see you.
And I don't know that we do it enough, because I feel like a little bit of it too is kind of like, is it uncool to like, you know, to say something, or, you know, like,
man. Be honest, be vulnerable. Again, that's what we need more of.
As you progressed into this, all right, I'm doing this full time. These other jobs, these other ways of, you know, earning income really aren't serving me and fulfilling me in the right way. So I'm going to make this jump and I'm going to focus on this, you know, intentionally. What were some of the challenges as that evolved in, you know, maybe navigating different gigs and figuring out how to really maintain that consistency of, you know, of work with things that you care about?
Well, I remember seeing an interview, I forget who it was, but they were saying like, man, if you're not getting called for work, make your own work. Do your own thing. Like, make your own thing. And I was like, what does that mean? How do you make your own thing if nobody's giving you work? And it hit me. I was like, yeah, man, just serve. So one of the things I did when it was really slow, and this is back when like Periscope was a thing, I went on there and I was like, hey, I'm going to do a free drum day. The first 10 artists or 10 tracks I get, I'm doing those drum for free. And I had already reached out to my engineer friend at the time, my buddy, Brandon Owens. He has a studio. And the fine print was like, man, it's free, but like, you still got to pay my engineer. So I did this and it created work. I got opportunities with artists I would have never got to work with that wanted to try me out, or had always wanted to try me out, but didn't think they could afford me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I did this for several years. When I got the call to possibly get the opportunity to play with Robert Cray, it was because they saw me doing these things. They didn't think I would want to get on the road because they're like, oh, he's in the studio. He's doing studio stuff. He might not want to go on the road. I was like, no, I'll go on the road. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it was because they saw me working. People saw me doing something. Those clients that I did things for free, of course, some of them came back. They're like, I love what you did. I gotta pay you, man. Like, what do you need? Because I want you to play on more songs or da 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 da. That created a network and an opportunity and a stream that gave me an opportunity to show several things. That I could be trusted to produce myself on your song. Secondly, play a lot of different styles. I could show range, like an actor would in different movies, right? All these people were singing very different things. You had a folk Americana thing, but then I have a pop thing, but then I have like this minimalistic thing. And I had a great engineer who we had fun because it was helping us grow in how to adjust and get these sounds and get them quickly. Because we weren't going past doing any of this stuff in past one day. That was the kicker. Like, we got to get these 10 tracks done in a day. That was a challenge. It was a beautiful challenge for both of us. And so that was the thing I think that really changed the course of how people saw me and what I was doing. I wasn't doing Instagram videos, like, look at me playing a groove. And I wanted to have relationships that would stand the test of time, not, content. I wanted to connect with people in a real way.
Well, really strong takeaway from that is that when we're introduced to a industry that is very like a gig-based occupation. So the focus of that gig-based occupation is that you get a call, you complete that gig, you hope that they call you again, but in the meantime, you're on to the next gig. There's a lot of missed opportunity, I think, in looking for other ways to do things that aren't generating immediate income that can generate so much more long-term income. Figuring out some way that you can be of value to the community that you're in.
Yeah.
And whether or not you're making money up front in doing that thing, as long as it's on your terms.
Yeah.
I think the challenging thing is when you get a call and somebody is clearly
assumes,
taking advantage of you, or they're like, well, we don't have, money for this, but then you see them shoot a $20,000 music video.
Exactly.
But they couldn't pay for the session.
Yeah.
Like those sort of things, I would, I'm not recommending that people just go work for free just for the heck of it, hoping that something's going to happen. But intentionally creating an environment for yourself through that and not being as concerned with what you're going to get right now, but what the opportunity could be through
and I still do it.
Value.
I think even when you get to a certain point, you still should do it. I still do it. People call me out. I'm doing free tracks for friends and people that like, hey man, I would love, like I bought her. Like I figure out a way, like it ain't got to be about money. It's like, man, I just want to be part of something that's good, man. I'm not saying like that's the way to do it. This is just my story. Like, I think everybody has to figure out their way and their version of that. There's no right way, but there's definitely a wrong way. And if you understand that statement, most people don't in this day and age, in this culture. But that statement is powerful. It's like saying, if you know, there's no right way, but there's a wrong way.
Speaking of like the wrong way, were there any moments throughout that development where you might have took a misstep or learned a really valuable lesson from taking the wrong way at some point?
I think my version of that was just kind of like being in situations where I took gigs and playing with people who didn't respect my time, and learning from that and saying, okay, still loving on it, still being kind, and saying, I'm not the right guy for this, and bowing out, going above and beyond in a different way, meaning like, I'm not the right guy for this gig. This gig is coming up in a couple days. Let me get you a sub that's ready, that's learned on the music. I'll talk to y'all later. Nice to meet you. Some would say, man, I'm not doing the gig. I'm not the right guy. You're on your own. I would at least say, man, let me get you a sub. Let me get somebody who would like this opportunity, take this opportunity, and need this opportunity. Every people ain't your people. And I had to learn that. Those are the missteps. It's like, man, you just learn it in the real time. And you could choose to either keep going and moving forward and working with them, or just being like, yeah, this is not my circle, and just pull out. So you're not frustrated on the bandstand or frustrated in the recording session. You know what I mean?
Right.
those are the moments I got quicker at figuring that out, and not having certain expectations where it would make me frustrated. I created the expectation. If I'm frustrated, it's because I did that, not because of them.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to learn how to step back and be like, man, take responsibility for that. I built this up, so I got to own that and make the decision that is necessary for me in this moment.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's powerful.
Yeah.
Well, getting into the creative process of being in the studio. In the room, you just heard the demo of the track. You're about to go in and do your first take.
Yeah.
What sort of things go through your mind, and what's your process for getting ready to like get in there and lay down the initial take or approach?
The way my brain works is very like an engineer mind, meaning like gears, and I see all the pieces. It's like I see the finished product, and it's like an image. They all just break away, and I see all the little things, and I'm like, okay, here's that works there. But like I hear a demo, and I first say, okay, what are the fundamental things that need to happen? Because I got to at least give that first before I get weird and creative and, avant-garde, like if that's necessary. But it's like, what's the meat first?
Mm-hmm.
I start there.
And what are those elements?
Those elements to me is just like tone. What do the drums need to sound like for this song? The vocalist, what's the timbre of their voice? How would the drums enhance that? The ebb and flow, because the drum roll, people forget this. The drum roll in a song is to keep time first, and then to announce when we're going to another section. That's the fundamentals of drumming, period. And it got to feel good. How do I transition? Now, guys, we're going to the chorus. All right, here's the bridge. Let's lift it up. Dynamics. That's what I'm thinking about in listening to the demo and the song. And then sometimes it's not even that overt. Sometimes it's like, it's hypnosis. This song requires not moving. It means just laying this groove down, never hitting the crash, never hitting the tom. It's just a vibe. So it's just knowing that and understanding that. And in every take, trying something a little different. And in my version of trying something a little different, I might try something that no one even told me to try. And if no one catches it and it works, I'm like, all right, cool. I'll do that the next take. I think that's a vibe. And if I'm with the right musicians on the session, like a Steve Mackey on bass, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. He's hearing that. And I know he heard it. We didn't have to have a conversation about it. He didn't point it out. But next time it's like, he hears that and he embellishes that moment. Now it becomes a thing. Now it becomes what we call a motif. Then I start to color once I got the meat, once I got the groove and the solid part of it. So that's kind of how I approach every session. But then it's also like the guidance of the producer. There are some producers that tell you exactly what they need, but then they want you to do your thing. There's some producers that don't tell you anything. They're like, I want to see what you're going to do first. There's some producers that are very specific. Like, I want it exactly like this. Give me this. Play with the tip of the stick on the hi-hat, no shoulder. Play in the middle of the snare drum, no side stick, no rim shot, rather. Those are the things that you learn. Play with the butt end of the stick. Like you learn, if they're saying like, I need some beefy, the snare needs to be beefy. Sometimes it's not a matter of changing the snare. It's just changing the way you're holding the stick, flipping the stick to the butt end and getting more of the body of the snare, loosening the snares, little subtle things like that, These are the things that's going on in my head, and it's happening rapid fire. And a lot of times it's happening with no one telling me.
What do you think are some of the things that helped you build the instinct to be able to determine what adjustments need to be made to make that work?
I'm going to go straight back to James Waddell. Whether we were going down as a band or we were having a session where it was just drums, man, he was hard in the best way. Specifically if it was, a drum day. It's like, man, if it wasn't right, repeat, get it. He's like, are your drums tuned? I'm like, yeah. Are you sure? Then I second guess it. I learned how to tune my drums. And I'm not talking about tuning a drum where it sounds good. That's not what we're talking about. I'm talking about understanding what's the key of the song, the chord structure, and how to tune my drums to complement that. That's tuning the drums.
Yeah. Can you explain that?
Oh man, if a key is in if a key is A, I'm gonna pull out my little keyboard app and I'm gonna find that and find the basic A chord within the structure of the song and tune my toms to that, or try to find the key where my snare is hitting that key. Like I've had experiences where you have engineers and they're like, man, the snare is ringing. It's like, yeah, it's a snare. It's supposed to ring, and it's going to have sympathetic ring to it. And I started to realize, okay, I'll tune it and make sure it's tuned to the key of the song. So now the ring is cool, right? When it rings in the key, and they're like, oh man, that's cool. That's great. It's ringing, but it's a good ring, you know? Mm-hmm. It's like figuring that out. And there's, again, that goes back to the principle. There's no right way, but there's a wrong way. Meaning like, man, in that situation, you know, we've heard records where snares, they're ringing and it ain't in tune. It ain't in the key, but it's just rock and roll, man. It's a vibe. And nobody's thinking about it because the drums were mic'd a certain way. It wasn't mic'd. It's understanding even the history of how drums were mic'd. It wasn't mic'd in a modern way where every drum had mics on it. Mm-hmm. There was an overhead mic and maybe a mic in front of the kit and a mic that was over the 2 rack toms and over the 2 floor toms versus each isolation. And the snare didn't even have a mic. Mm-hmm. It's just resonating from the overhead and the hi-hat, if there's a hi-hat mic. So the ring wasn't as dominant because it created a vibe and a live energy to it. But then when you get into the modern technique of mic and drums, you're going to hear everything. So then it's like understanding how to adjust to those tastes. You know what I mean? Right. The reason why I think you've heard in the past, like a little too long for me, but you've heard drums sound dry and flat. It's because a lot of cats just forgot how to tune and forgot how to embellish tone in drum sounds. You know what I mean? I think some of that's coming back. I think it's awesome. Mm-hmm. But I think there was a series of like trying to sound like drum samples, trying to sound like programming. Right? And that's cool, but we got all those samples. I want to sound like drums again. And we can marry those two where they sound perfect. It sounds like a perfect marriage. And James Waddell was the hard one on me, man. He wanted to see me be better. And I was like, all right, Jake, like we would like, I was like, what do you want? Like, what is it? He's like, and he would have a little snarky remark and it was like the best. And I didn't take it personal. We would laugh about it. Cause when we would get the product and it was great, I come in, he's like, that's what I'm talking about. That was great. And we would have a good time and have a good laugh because we fought in a healthy way and we worked hard to find that thing. Mm-hmm.
When you think about blending drums with programming, are there any techniques that you found that help with that when you're working on a track where there's drum loops that you're playing along to?
Oh, yeah. I think the first thing is to not try to sound like the drum loop. When I first started doing that, I would be like, okay, I need to make my drums sound like that. It's like, no, I need to make my drums sound a little bit opposite of that. Like if those drum sounds are like dry and tight and vibey, then my drums need to be open. So then when the chorus comes, the drums give it a life. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I try to go complete opposite of whatever the programming is, tonally, approaching it like I'm playing with another drummer. In order for our colors to complement each other, I need to do things to help either accentuate your sound. So if it's a higher sounding snare, I'm going to go lower because then it's going to beef it up and it's going to marry well. Mm-hmm. It's going to have that top end and that mid to low end if necessary. So whenever it hits, it's like, wow, it's this married kind of thick sound.
When you have live drums on top of programming, oftentimes engineers going to quantize stuff and and lock it in. Sometimes there's a really interesting like character to it when it's not locked in because the programming's locked in and the drums aren't. What do you think about in your head as you're approaching that with that in mind, with like the quantization of it and how tight you need to be versus giving it like a feel or whatever?
I try to dance with it. If my part needs to be quantized, they'll do that. I want to dance with the song and make it move. And so that doesn't always mean being right on top of the click or behind the click. It just means moving with the song and trying to make it dance. And that's why I'm there, because I'm a human being with a heartbeat playing a groove.
Cymbal selection.
Oh, yeah.
Is a massive difference that I see between professionals and people that want to be professionals.
Yeah.
What things have you learned, and what are some of your approaches and philosophies around how to choose the right cymbals for a track?
Man, there are so many cymbals out here. The company I play and I love is Istanbul Agop. They still hand hammer. Not to knock any machine-made, machine-spun stuff. I'm not doing it. I'm just talking about what I like. I like the hand hammer stuff because of the complexities in which remain in that metal. A song has so many frequencies and so many things happening And man, that's what creates color. And I like that in my cymbals. But I also know which cymbals don't work in that particular song or that key. And you hear it. That's my job to catch that. The producer can't catch everything that everybody's doing. I did a session recently where I had 2 drum setups, a concert tom kit in a small room, like dry and tight. And then I had a live room kit, double tom setup. Both were very different, both were mic'd differently. The dry and tight sound, I had to go with like brighter cymbals, heavier cymbals, because there were less mics. And if I went darker, those cymbals would get lost. They didn't have that energy explosion that you want in a track. So I went heavy, and the heavy is intimidating because it's clangy. You know what I mean? It could get really annoying, but when you do it in the right context with the right mic setup, man, it's a vibe. It sounded like the classic records that we love, you know? But then in the live room, I changed that. It was a different cymbal setup, you know? I could go a little bit darker just because like the mics are everywhere. I didn't want them to be so harsh and take over the whole track of the drums. Mm-hmm. So it's just knowing that, I think, and my cymbals play a big part of that. I mean, I show up to every session with at least, and I'm not saying this as a flex. I'm saying this as I'm grateful for this, but I show up with like at least 4 or 5 cymbal bags with an array of different cymbals, different rides, different hi-hats, different sizes of hi-hats, crashes, because I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to need in this room, in this studio, for this song or this artist. I have no idea. And I don't like to not have what I might need. It's like a guitar player bringing pedals and pedal boards. Like that's what snares and cymbals are for me. Even certain perk elements, you know, like certain tambourines that I know just work and that are beautiful. Like,
here's a discussion that we had recently about tambourines. Steve Brewster was here last week.
Okay.
And he had a couple tambourines that he had brought in, and then I have one that I just absolutely love. And I told him, man, here's this tambourine. I'd like you. Could you use this one? I think it'll work a little bit better for the track. And he's like, wow, this one's cool, man. I got one kind of like this. And I was like, well, let me tell you the story. So I was working with this producer, and one day after lunch, we went over to Forks, and there's the whole wall of tambourines, right? There's like 200 tambourines or whatever on the wall. And we went through and I shook every single one of them until I found one that I felt like had just like the right thing for my ear, for how I wanted to hear that sound of those little tiny cymbals shaking together.
Yeah.
And I found this one, but when I was going through there, I didn't look at the price tags of any of them, you know? So of course the one that I find is like the $300
I know exactly which one you got.
Right?
Yeah.
And he's like, dude, I did the exact same thing, you know, went over there and got it. But it's interesting because, you know, you think a tambourine, it's a pretty simple instrument.
It's not.
You know, it's a circle. It's got the little things on it. You shake it. But in a recording, it's so important to have some variety and some options with that, because similar to cymbals, you don't know where the timbre of the track is and where that element needs to fit in sonically. And it's so much more organic.
Yes.
When you don't have to EQ the crap out of the tambourine to get it to fit in. So with that said, how have you found the tambourines that you find to be the best for a track and what you would use?
I have a lot of tambourines, man. I have tambourines from like churches that were just sitting there, and I asked, could I take it? Because I like, this sounds cool. You know what I mean? You got to have a vintage low wig, double row. That's just the Motown vibe, but it's bigger than Motown. It's like it's the sound. It's just right. But the ones, I have 2 of them. They cost a penny, man. I got an 8-inch and a 10-inch, and they're the Von Crafts, and they were not cheap. And the cool thing about them, they have their own kind of verb. I can't explain. I wish I would have brought it to you, because you seem like,
well, yeah, that's the one that I was telling you about.
That's what I figured. Yeah, you hit it once, and it does the thing that you didn't even know you wanted it to do. You know. So I have 2 of those, and I bring them in every session without fail. I have some trashy ones, because sometimes I'll play the Von Craft with a trashy one just to give just some kind of color and some contrast, because I might play one for one section and then double another one. You know what I mean? So, I mean, all of that is just the art of making music. It's subjective, man. But I'd rather have the options than to not.
In the other chairs in the room when you're on a tracking session, what are some of the things that you from your drum chair pay attention to that might impact the way that you're approaching something and what you play?
The same way I'm kind of self-producing myself, I am self-adjusting to how everybody in the room feels a quarter note. Everybody feels the quarter note differently, where they place their note, where they're feeling it. Specifically with the bass player, you have to find that spot quickly. Because if you two are fighting, no one has a point of reference. So if I'm kind of naturally on top of the beat and the bass player is on the back end of the beat, I got to figure out how to find that middle point, because we're just going to always be like, you know. I learned this from my mentors, drumming mentors, from watching Keltner and being under Steve Jordan. Like, I don't ask them to adjust. I adjust. That's the mark of a great musician. Paying attention and adjusting. The beautiful thing is when you have the right cast, they feel the same way. So we all can make the adjustments.
Right.
I just try to adjust and serve and cater to what's necessary. Still give the time. Like I said before, my whole goal, the whole purpose of me being in the room is to keep time, let people know where we're going, and make it feel good.
So there's the other side of that, is knowing when to bring things up and when not to bring things up, which is a lot of recognizing, reading the room,
personalities,
thinking about personality, and the pace of the session.
Yeah.
So if do we have enough time to explore this, and is it the right time and place to explore this, and is that personality going to vibe well with us, with me bringing this up to explore it? So there's some kind of like the obvious things that that you just sort of seem to be regularly understood, but are there any sort of like epiphanies that you've had in that thought process of the communication that goes on in the room?
I went from being so excited and catching everything and be like, what if we do this? And you get all worked up because it's a great session. You got the right cast, you got the right song, and you just want it to work. And I'm like, man, God, I've been that guy. Mm-hmm. Then you learn all of that's going to happen. Take your time, because sometimes I could just sit back and not say anything, and the artist will say it. I'm like, yes, they caught it. Just kind of keep creating the bed for things to be figured out and said. It doesn't always have to come from me. It doesn't always have to be like me trying to prove that I see it and I feel it and I need to be the one to say it. Most of the people I work with now, they act like, hey, what are you thinking, Terence? That's the chance that you have to maybe point out a couple things here and there, but you don't blitz them with everything. Every session is not my session to lead or have an opinion on.
Are there any particular records that you've played on that stand out where something just incredible happened that would be a cool story to share?
It was a record I did with Robert Cray. We cut it in 2019. It came out the top of 2020. The making of that record to this day is the highest I've ever been in experiencing a recording session. I'll paint the picture for you. I'll give you the scenario. It was at Capitol, Studio B, with Nico Bolas and Al Schmidt engineering. Steve Jordan producing. You already got Robert Cray, he's legendary. And I'm in his band. So when you're in the band, you play the record. And we're just in one room together, in the round, playing this music. But one of the stories I remember, we were playing this song that Cray wrote, and we were trying to get it. It had all these hits that he kind of was wanting, but the groove wasn't feeling right, and we were just trying to figure it out. It was late one night. Steve called it. He's like, hey guys, let's just take a break. Cool. And in my mind, I'm like, man, I got to get this groove right. So the next morning, we walk in, and I beeline to like the kit. Like I say, hey, but I go straight to the kit. So I just start playing the groove. Just playing the groove. Now, I'm working with like old school cats that know when something's happening, they got you in the red. It's just in the red. Steve comes in the room. He starts playing conga. And we just grooving. No one's saying we starting a session. No, it's just an energy. Craig comes in. He starts playing the groove. And we just grooving. Richard comes in on the bass and he starts kind of filling in and kind of finding it. He'll stop, kind of play, getting the sound. He's playing the groove. So we play this for like 9 minutes plus, just on this groove, on the one. We finally got the groove of the song. It's feeling good. So I start playing the hi-hat, just 16ths, to kind of signify I'm about to count us in. 1, 2, 1, 2, and I leave space for the 1, 3, 4, crash into the 1, right? And we play the song. We played the song all the way through. It felt good. So we go in, everybody's excited. We like, man, that was badass. That was killer, man. You know, whatever. Yeah, bro. Cray has this idea. He said, man, I think I could sing the whole song over the one. Just over that whole period of us just playing without any changes. So we just go back. We move back to the beginning of the tape. And Cray sings the whole song over it. He does his solo. So when you hear this song, at the end of the song, on the record, what ended up being the record is the end of the song, you hear me count us in. That was originally the beginning of the song. But like, that's when the song starts to fade out and it ends. And it was like the most magical moment to me because I was like, that's how great moments are made. I remember Jim Keltner came to hang out. Like this, I'm still blown away by this. Like these are names that you see on credits growing up and I'm like in the room with him. And he comes and hangs out and they're playing this song. And I remember sitting down and I'm like, man, you know, my heroes are in here. Like I'm freaking out, you know. I caught Keltner looking at Steve. He was like, who's on drums? And Steve was like, he pointed at me, he's like, and Jim did this face. He was like, oh yeah. It was the biggest affirmation I could have ever gotten, bro. And I didn't see it. It was like I wasn't supposed to see it. It was just amongst them, but I kind of got a glimpse. I'm like, I just had to leave the room. I was like, I can't believe that just happened. Oh my God. You know, to be affirmed by these men who I look up to, it fueled me in a humble way where I was like, man, I'm part of this. Like Steve could play the whole record. He's producing, he could play the whole record. But I'm here and he's like, no, you got it. You're doing a great job. That experience to me fueled a level of confidence that wasn't ego confidence. It was like, man, I can do this. I'm in the rooms that I'm in because I'm chosen to be there because they believe I can do it. So when I go into any room now, that's the level of confidence I have. Even if I'm not the right guy or it's proven to be later, like I might not be the right guy for this. It's like, man, that doesn't degrade or demote me to be like, I'm not good. That session is to this day one of the best sessions, the best experiences of my life.
When you think about maintaining longevity in a lifelong career in this business, what advice would you give to yourself and others to be able to survive this incredibly challenging roller coaster ride of art?
Man, I think don't listen to advice. Just take the pieces that you hear that speak to you and apply them the best way you can to your scenario. Advice is so specific to the person because if I give advice, I feel like I'm telling you based on my limitations of my experiences are my limitations. They're not limits. They're just the only thing I know. Like these podcasts and these sharing these things, these is all good information, but like take from it what you need to take from it. You know, you don't have to take all of it. There's a lot of fat in here. There's a lot of lean meat. One of the things I would definitely say is necessary is mentorship. And you don't just say, hey, sir or ma'am, can you be my mentor? It doesn't work like that. You have to be invited. Like I was invited to be under Steve because he saw something in me. So don't be offended if somebody don't bring you in. In order to get that and experience that, you have to be open. All these things connect. You have to be vulnerable and open for people to see the real you, not some caricature or some persona of you and what you think people want to see, the best parts of you. You have to be vulnerable. So the people who are meant to mentor you or bring you in can see what they can offer and what they can bring to the table to help better you. Mentorship is something that's being lost because a lot of people think, oh, I get this information on YouTube or social media. It's like, man, but there's nothing like having someone you can call about real life stuff. They have nothing to do with the music. But how do I deal with this thing that we're doing while I'm going through this other thing? A real mentor will help you with that. And there are incredible men and women out here with experiences that could share with you that are unbiased. I think that's the only thing I would say. That's why I'm who I am. That's why I've gotten to where I've gotten because someone brought me into it. It wasn't the things that I did. It was because somebody saw something in me.
Yeah, that's incredible, man.
Yeah.
I mean, the power of mentorship, it's obviously why we're sitting here.
Yeah.
Because of the belief that we have in being able to bring that kind of back to life in our industry where we can help guide the next, generation. And we're grateful for you to have taken the time to sit down and talk with us.
Man,
And
thank you, Gio.
tell us your story.
Thank you for having me, man.
Get so much out of this. Thank
This
you.
is a great, your content that you're making and the people you've had here, it's great, man. Keep doing it. I hope people will jump on and realize you're creating a library of incredible stories and information that will serve the test of time and the legacy of what we call music making and producing.